Hey, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Code Breakers. My name is Phil Boyer. We've got Ammon Johns and Kristen Drysdale with us here today. And we're talking about superhero movies and their virality. I can't say that word, virality. Virility. And why are these movies so popular? For me, I wanted to do this show because I don't understand the popularity of these movies. I don't like them. I don't care for them. It seems like it's the same movie over and over. There's thousands of these things with, you've got X-Men, you've got Batman, you've got Superman, each with their own sequels to them. You've got reboots. We've had 20,000 different Batman movies, and nobody ever seems to like the guy that plays Batman. I never understood that either, why they kept making bad choices. But anyway, today we're going to be talking about why these things are so popular. I'm sure you guys have some opinions on that as well, so if you want, leave those on the event page, and we'll try to bring those onto the show. So before we dive in here, let me say hi to Ammon Johns. What's up, man? How's it going on the other side of the pond over there?
Oh, things are good. It's cold, but things are all good. You might guess that I'm a slight superhero fan. Just a subtle clue or two.
Just a little bit, yeah. Kristen, what's going on?
Hey, how are you?
Good.
Doing good over here.
Awesome. All right, so I had kids, so I was kind of had to watch some of these. I even played Batman with my kids at times. I would call them on the phone on their birthday as Batman and wish them a happy birthday and have a chat with them, and they loved it. It made their day. So superheroes are definitely something that kids enjoy, but it's not just for kids anymore. It's also for adults. And I want to dive into some numbers here, and it's just crazy. So in 2012, back in May, the Avengers movie came out. The opening box office was over $207 million. So far, it's made $623 million. That's a lot of money. That's more money than some countries have. It's just insane. The Dark Knight, back in 2008, their opening weekend was $158 million. Let's see, and to date, about 300 and almost 335 million. What do we got that's more recent here? Guardians of the Galaxy opening weekend, a mere 95 million. To date, 331 million. So these movies are making. I mean, I've got a list here of the top 22 movies, superhero movies, and there's billions and billions of dollars here that are just being spent on watching these things and actually creating them. And you've got a comment. I'm with you, Phil Boyer. Oh, you took it off. There's only so many times we can save the world before it gets obvious. Very true. So, why do these things get popular? Ammon, why do you think these things are so popular?
Well, at heart, the superhero is just a regular hero taken to the extreme. And I think what's most interesting for me is I think all heroes have become superheroes. I don't think we have any non-superheroes anymore. If you watch the average action film, these guys are dancing with bullets in real time. I don't know if anyone's ever been to a shooting range, but a gunfight doesn't look like what a gunfight looks like on TV these days. This was invented by the Hong Kong film industry. And John Woo is particularly famous for it. They started to call it bullet time, but originally they called it bullet ballet, this idea that people could jump over things while bullets are flying, that they could, have this action scene, martial arts with guns. So, to an extent, I say that actually we haven't just moved towards superhero movies, we've actually moved away from anything that isn't a superhero movie.
That's interesting. So have we ever had just a regular hero movie, or have we always had superheroes in these movies? If you think about westerns, were those just regular heroes, or was there a superhero element to them?
I think most of them were heroes up until the spaghetti westerns. I think that was when we started to see the superhero western. Clint Eastwood's character, the man with no name, was definitely the superhero type. He was the absolute fastest gun. The Call Me Trinity series of films, again, this guy was super fast. And we started to see takeoffs of that in Blazing Saddles, where, you know, take this thing out my hand. You just see him twitch a bit, and whatever is supposed to have happened has happened. So, when was the last time you saw a fight scene that wasn't a full-on martial arts extravaganza? Because you go back to John Wayne, a fight scene was he slung one big right hook and the fight was over.
Very true. Very true. Yeah, these days it's all choreography. It's a dance almost. And you know, for me, it drives me nuts watching those fight scenes. It really does, because it's for me, it's obvious that it is really a choreographed dance and nothing more. And I don't know. I can't get into the scene itself. I can't get into the fight because I don't know. I know what's going on. I've been ruined because I've been on TV sets and movie sets, and I've seen what's going on, and I know what the magic is. And that stuff is just, I don't know. I can't get into it. But Kristen, what's your... Oh, go ahead, Em.
Isn't the World Wrestling Federation and all its incarnations, all of these, you know, wrestling is stuntmen pretending to fight with these extravagant things. You know, the guy gets out the ring, grabs a chair, whacks the other guy with it. Does anyone think this is a real fight? Of course not. But we still appreciate the artistry. We still appreciate the storytelling in it, the drama, the tension. Mm-hmm. That's what it's all about. We kind of want this escapism to be real escapism. We don't want the troubles that we've got in our own lives just turned onto the screens. I hate soap opera. I hate soap opera. You know, I do kind of think, well, how often can people be murdered on this one ranch before the FBI move in and shut it down? You know,
and how many times can the same person be murdered and they come back? Yeah. But that's an interesting take, because I want, and maybe I'm just weird, but I want my escapism to be real. I want it to be, well, realistic, I should say. Not necessarily real, but realistic. I don't want to be duped. If I want to escape, I want it to be as real as possible.
Mm.
So,
now, for me, that has to be in the character themselves. The psychology has to feel real. I don't care that they've got superpowers. What I care about is that the logic follows through from that. This guy has superpowers. How has this changed his life? Is he acting in character with this? So the last reboot of Superman actually works. It's about his isolation and about how he'd cover this up and about his worries about whether the world is ready to know he's out there. The Dark Knight. Batman was almost ruined by the 60s TV show. You know, it had become a joke. The joke was bigger than the original story, except to die-hard comic fans. But there was one series of comic books created by an absolute master, which was called The Dark Knight, and therefore is the second film in the series. And he reinvented Batman and went into the psychology more. You know, why bats? Because it was the thing he was afraid of, and this whole thing was about this guy overcoming his fear and becoming fear to other people. So when there's a deeper story and the psychology of the characters works, the story works for me.
Right, yeah. I mean, I can make exceptions to reality, like people flying or that kind of thing, right? I just want the story to be realistic. I don't want it to be so far-fetched that it's just like, okay, really? You're really doing that? You know, that for me, that ruins it. And for me, some of the fight scenes do that. The fight scenes aren't realistic. People don't fight that way. You know, it's, you know, you've got movies like The Transporter where one guy is taking on 7 other guys, you know, and you can just see them. They're like, all the other guys, 6 guys are standing there waiting for their turn. It's like, that's not how it's going to work, you know. So that's the kind of realism that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So Kristen,
Transporter too.
Kristen, what's your
third one? You think why are people hanging around this guy? He's wherever he goes, Things go wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I just want to know what's so wrong with dance.
Leave it to the dancer to say that. You know, there's absolutely nothing wrong with dance in the right context. Context for everything.
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, like they're like that to me. That's heroine. Like they're just so beautiful, and the fact that they can do these things with their bodies. That's my thing as a dancer.
That's a really nice one to bring up, actually, because it epitomizes that style of things and the fact that it is a different art form. They have turned fighting into dance. You know, it's so clearly over the top. It's so clearly beautifully choreographed, excellently acted. That for me, that works, and I love that film works on a global level, even though it's so Chinese. It's so a film that Hollywood and America would never make. The hero dies in the end. Well, we can't have that. The audience wouldn't like that, and they loved it because they almost you know, the elements that the Chinese love in these things of things being bigger than a person's life. There are things that a person is prepared to lay down their life for. That does translate. We do understand that. Every country that has policemen, firemen, armed forces who are risking their lives for others every single day does understand that. And I think it would be nice if Hollywood was able to kind of appreciate that people are more mature than they think.
I agree.
I love that you use the word elements also, using the environment to help them aid their cause. It is just absolutely beautiful artistry, the way that they make nature involved.
Let's see. Come on.
Yeah, Cheryl says she agrees that Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is an artful movie for sure. And David brings up that his favourite hero, psychologist as well, Rorschach, which is, of course, one of the more recent hero movies, Watchmen, and that had a wonderful take on how heroes at a certain point of history might have changed the entire world, where the dark times of anti-communism that were kind of wiped out by the failure in Vietnam would have, you know, what if America had won and had validated some of the wrongful thinking that was going on at that time? And it was a fascinating look into that. But yeah, he was a fascinating character because he was the most flawed of them all.
Right on. So let's dive into the story aspect of this. And I mean, you and I were kind of talking about this in the green room before, about the different, you know, if we look at the story itself, boil it down to its basic fundamentals, there's nothing special about it. It's a formula that's been used for thousands and thousands of years. You know, we have these mythical type people, we have extraordinary circumstances, we have good and evil, and really those elements are in practically every story ever told. So what is it about the formula that superhero movies have? Why does it take that to the extreme? Why are we seeing these movies make $600 million?
Well, partly it's that they invest a lot more. I mean, superhero movies have been around a long, long time, and I posted, you know, one of the earliest I found from 1941. The reason that Superman can fly is because of a set of movies where they tried to use the original thing where he could leap tall buildings in a single bound, and he travelled like the Hulk by doing these huge jumps. They didn't like the way it looked, so they said, can we make him fly? And the studio said, okay, and from then on, Superman, the whole story changed that he could fly. He got this new power because it looked better on screen. He's the hero I don't like. Superman, to me, is boring. There's nothing he can't do. There's nothing that really endangers him except they had to invent this rock called kryptonite that can. And I don't know. It doesn't work for me. You know, this is supposed to be this incredibly rare thing, and yet every villain seems to be able to find a piece.
But there is Lois Lane. She's sort of a kryptonite for him because no matter what scrape she gets in, he's going to be there no matter what. Even if it's going to put his own life in danger, even if there's kryptonite there, he's going to go.
Yeah, but the very fact that he's just so incredibly powerful that his only weaknesses are the ones he chooses to have, kind of, yeah, you know, he's even able to turn back time by making the world, you know, reverse its track. Yeah, okay. Who's
and
your
he doesn't even have a secret identity. It's weird. He doesn't have a mask or anything, and yet nobody can figure out who he is.
Those are very bad glasses.
Yeah.
If you put on one pair of glasses and suddenly nobody can recognize you, there's something seriously wrong. Maybe because it was, you know, come up within the 30s and 40s, the idea of a man walking around with his underpants on the outside, everyone was just so focused on that they never saw his face.
That's true. Or maybe they were superhero magical glasses. Yeah.
One of the very first superheroes actually doesn't have superpowers by our standards. One of the very first ones that turned up in comic books was the Shadow, who was, you know, this guy who could be anyone. He could, you know, he was a master of disguise and he had a gun. That was his real superpowers. And it's fascinating how the powers had to get more dynamic, more visual, and more physical before the genre really, really took hold.
Mm-hmm.
I do like the idea that, you know, every superhero has his weakness, and I don't mean the Achilles heel or the kryptonite. One of my favourites was Spider-Man, because he had this choice. You know, yeah, he could use his powers badly and selfishly and probably have been very rich, but in trying to be a good guy and protect people around him, he had to keep his identity secret, and so his ordinary life, he's a complete failure. You know, he's a college kid who can't seem to hold down a regular job, struggles with girlfriend issues and all kinds of, you know, perception issues, and there he is out being a hero, but without ever taking the limelight. And I loved that exploration of the choices we make.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I have Todd LeBeau over in a private chat, and he said that I could read his comment. Obviously, no one has read anything by Joseph Campbell, huh? The power of myth and the hero with 1,000 faces immediately comes to mind. Storytelling has not fundamentally changed in eons. And he also says hi.
That's the one Phil and I were discussing in the green room, what we call the monomyth, that eternal story. It's often, you know, boy in a small place, doesn't realise he's special, goes off, discovers new things, has these wonderful adventures. Of course, there's the dark villain that threatens his home. Basically, it's the story of Star Wars with Luke Skywalker, and that is a superhero movie. You know, this little farm boy turns out to have a destiny far bigger than he thought. He's got superpowers he didn't know about. You know, he's able to use a laser sword, for goodness sake, and, you know, fight off laser blasts. It's a superhero movie, but it uses the monomyth, the eternal story, and of course eventually they return home and they've changed the world that they live in.
That sort of reminds me of The Work and the Glory. Have you guys seen those movies?
Mm-hmm.
Which one?
The Work and the Glory.
No.
Okay, it's the story actually are based off of books, and those books are based off of they're like partly true, partly not, and they covered like the pioneers' travels, and talks about the early beginnings of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. These movies are so powerful, and they talk about the same thing. Joseph just being like that real person, and then you see throughout this whole thing, like him just come to this point where he's struggling through everything, and it's just absolutely amazing. if you're a member, non-member of that church, it is really powerful. I even showed it to one of my non-member friends, and he just wanted to watch it again, and he is not even in a church or anything. But yeah, it had that same monolith story.
Yeah, so Tim brings up the Hero Quest story all over again. Exactly, Tim. It's kind of the story of, you know, Jason and the Argonauts, or the story of the Odyssey. So these myths go right back as far as we've had myths, right back to the ancient Greeks, who were the first ones who wrote anything we can remember and read now. But the chances are, if we could interpret enough cave painting, we'd probably find some others. You know, the guy who invented the spear, and that was his superpower. You know, these stories have been around forever, and I think part of that is what resonates. It's part of us. These stories are built into us, not only through our own growing up, but through generations. There's almost a genetic memory to these stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the difference between movies like superhero movies and other movies like The Transporter, where there is a hero element, is I think the heroes in these superhero movies are, for the most part, all good guys. If you look at The Transporter, he's kind of a good guy, but he's also doing illegal stuff. So it's really hard to get behind him 100%, as opposed to, you know, somebody like Batman. But even a guy like Batman even breaks the law. He's just a regular dude that he's actually breaking the law too, but I guess it's because it's for the betterment of society that people can overlook that part of it, and it's you know, people can get behind that. And I think, you know, when times get tough, you know, we could argue that times are pretty tough right now for a lot of people, and we want that escapism. We brought the escapism up earlier, you know, and it's nice to think that we have these people out there that can sweep in and help us, our white knight that can make all the politicians go away for good and replace them with good people, and you know, all this good stuff. So we don't look at guys like the Transporter as that guy that can come in and save us, but guys like Batman and Spider-Man, and I hate to say it, but even Superman can come in and save us. So is that the fundamental part of the story, the psychology part of it, that makes these movies different, that we'll watch 17,000 of them all in a row and talk about them like they're going out of style versus other types of movies? And why movies like Star Wars have lasted so long? That's you know, that's a what now, almost a 40-year-old franchise that, well, probably not, closer to 30, but you know, that we're still talking about that thing, and Disney releases this minute trailer that really kind of sucks, but yet everybody's talking about it.
Yeah. Let me just bring up David's comment. Using your superpower of wealth to beat up anyone you want. Batman.
Yeah, you know, that's a great point, because, you know, one could argue he's the 1%, and yet he's out there doing whatever he wants, but yet we still stand behind him.
Yeah, yeah, and again, it's that thing of choice. This guy could have a life. He's got enough wealth. He could isolate himself from all the problems of the city. He wouldn't care. He can afford to live anywhere. He can buy his own island. He can do anything he wants, and yet he still chooses to care about the people and put his life on the line for them. And I think that choice is always part of what makes a hero. Whether they're on the right side of the law or the wrong, some heroes are entirely on the wrong side of the law because maybe the law is flawed. That's what we're talking about. We're often, with these films, talking about justice rather than law, and those are two different concepts. It's no accident that, you know, the superhero league is the Justice League in the DC universe. And in the Marvel universe, it's of course the Avengers, not to prevent things that have gone wrong, but to avenge it, and understanding that sometimes heroes are those people who go beyond the law. I wouldn't say above, but certainly beyond. I think one of the things that was really interesting about Batman, certainly with The Dark Knight, is he understands he's breaking the law, and he understands it needs to make him an enemy. That's kind of what the city needs. It needs people to respect the law and to view him as the bad guy for a while.
Right on. And I apologize for my dogs barking at what is probably the mailman out there. Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit. Let's move beyond the story and into the actual marketing of these superhero movies. Now, these studios have huge, huge marketing budgets, but yet they still kind of do things that us guys, marketers here with no budgets, they use the same techniques and the same things. YouTube being one. I did a little research on some of the trailers that they threw out on YouTube and looked at the views. And one of the things that I saw is one of the triggers that they use is mystery in these trailers. The Dark Knight Rises, that the first trailer ended with simple text overlay that said the legend ends and then the date of the movie. That generated huge spikes in interest and conversation and views. That video, just the official view, there's other people uploading their own, had 33 million views on that, just on a simple, whatever it was, a minute and a half trailer. So I think it comes down to using certain triggers like, okay, are they killing off Batman in this? What's going on? I think that's a really great way to entice interest in that. And again, I'm not a superhero fan, so I've seen maybe 3 or 4 of these movies, and I typically ignore trailers. So, but I do think that most trailers, I think, are horrible. They take a lot of the good parts and throw it out there and entice people to come in, and then the whole story comes into context once you're there. That's typical, obviously, with any movie trailer. Now, if we look at this latest one, Star Wars one from Disney, I mean, that's just a horrible trailer. I don't think it has mystery. I don't think it has anything, yet people are talking about it. Mostly they're talking about the lightsaber and how horrible the lightsaber is and how nobody likes it and how, from a technical standpoint, it won't work. Was that on purpose?
I wouldn't say on purpose, but the thing is that the fans are so passionate now. I mean, because Superman, Spider-Man, Batman are part of our childhood, they're part of our entire lives, we feel like this is our story you're messing with. If your version of it is different to ours, and we saw the same thing with The Lord of the Rings, of course, that other people had read that as a kid and had grown up with it, and they've got their own vision in their mind of what that film should look like if it was made into a film, and it wasn't the same. Wow, you've messed with my story. And I think whatever book is turned into a movie, we always see that to an extent. So I don't think that there is a backlash is the unusual part. I think it's the sheer size of it, of how many people feel personally attached to this story. There's a lot more superhero fans out there than almost any other kind. It almost beating the Trekkie fans and the Star Wars fans.
We see the same thing in like Bible stories and myths and legends. Like Merlin is my biggest hero story that I can think of. He's just a little pipsqueak and, you know, saves all of everything. But yeah, I right on. Yeah, it like goes from stories that we're just so attached to, we grow up with, and yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And we are invested in these because they are stories that have meant something to us. That's the root of the superhero story, isn't it? Is that we identify with some of the choices they make. We feel sometimes like we're not living the lives that we were supposed to, that our superpower hasn't shown up yet, that we are more special than people realize we are. We're in our plain identity and people haven't yet realized the superhero we are. Isn't that the ultimate appeal of the superhero story, is that that's me and people don't know it yet?
Mm-hmm. Right on. Yeah, and I think that's too why we stay invested in these things even though we don't want to. If we look at the Star Wars franchise, what Lucas kind of did to the second batch of movies, episodes 1, 2, and 3, nobody liked those. Yet we still went and watched them. We still went to the theater to see what it was all about, even though we knew we were going to be disappointed. And then now Disney owns it, and for me, it's like, okay, anything Disney touches is just, they just ruin it, right? I'm sure people would argue that, but and you know, this trailer comes out, and we can't get enough of it. You know, we sit and we watch it, and we invest time into it, even though there's a lot of people that weren't happy with Disney buying this franchise. And truth be told, you know, this movie doesn't look half bad if you can kind of get around the bad parts of the trailer. You know, it does kind of look old school. It doesn't look like that second set of really horrible, overproduced movies. So it's going to be interesting to see the box office on that, on what happens, even with people not happy that Disney owns it or unsure of what we're going to experience, especially with the last 3 movies that we've had. I mean, I'll watch the first, you know, the originals over and over and over. And I hate that they started with episode 4, because you can't say the first 3, because what does that mean? But anyway, yeah, the original movies are just epic, you know, and they're so low budget, but yet they're so awesome at the same time. And it wasn't until they, you know, when Lucas started adding all that crap to it, it just took away the magic, I think, to it.
The funny thing is, of course, they weren't low budget. These were record-breaking budgets at the time. There was only one film more expensive than Star Wars at that time, because they had to invent this technology. And the only thing I actually like about the Star Wars films, sorry fans, but they're lousy. The storytelling, you know, there's one decent actor in it, and that's Harrison Ford. The storytelling was very typical, not thought through. That psychology is missing. But what was special about those is that they changed the way films were made forever. And all of the superhero movies today owe their existence to the fact that special effects have come so far. And one of the reasons they've come so far is that the special effects of the time of Star Wars were not up to scratch. And for the first time, we saw computers used to do the special effects, to do the animation. The space fight scenes were actually plotted out by computer, run by computer. That level of technology hadn't been around. They had to invent it. They had to start up their own special effects studios. Industrial Light and Magic was one of those companies. LucasArts, of course, is another of those companies. But they pushed the boundaries, and the whole genre of film and TV has reaped the benefits ever since. So for me, Star Wars does make my top 100 movies for what it created, even though I can't stand the movie, especially not the third one with the damn little teddy bears.
Yeah, but you know, kids love the little teddy bears, the little live walking teddy bears. But that one though had a pretty epic chase scene in it, if I'm remembering correctly, through the woods and stuff. That was pretty cool.
Yeah,
and I think that makes like the top 5 chase scenes for me in a movie.
It's an interesting thing going back to the ownership thing. Of course, you know, yeah, a lot of people are unhappy with Disney owning it, but of course, if Disney hadn't bought this and then wanted to realise a return on that investment, there wouldn't be these new movies. George Lucas had always intended that there were 3 sets of 3 movies, that the middle trilogy was the first trilogy, then there was a prequel and a postquel trilogy, and that was it. There was no extra, and it's only because Disney have bought this, along with a lot of other franchises, including, of course, Marvel's film rights, that we are seeing all of this kind of stuff coming out again. I think the other thing that is behind some of this is how profitable those movies are, not just as movies, but these days it's all about the game of the movie and the book of the movie and all of those merchandisable things, and superheroes have that in spades, whether it's Lego getting the franchise to do the little figures these days, or whether it's the computer games, whether it's the Lego version of the computer games. All of these things mean that that movie can be so incredibly expensive to make, 200 million, and still make huge profits. And these days, our expectations of movies have come up so high that the budgets have to be so high that it's very difficult for a movie to make a profit.
True, very true. That's a whole different. We could totally sidetrack. That's a whole different show on the cost of making these movies. I don't think they need to be that high. I think one of the things that I don't like about these movies, these superhero movies, is that it seems to be a lot. The story tends to rely on special effects a lot of the time. You know, especially in like Transformers. That's all special effects. There's really, the story in that is just horrible.
Yeah, you like this comment.
Popularity of superhero movies theory 1. Special effects are only reason worth going to movies anymore. Except for me, I'm the exact opposite. Special effects are why I don't go to movies. I really don't watch a lot of movies. I'm kind of stuck in the 70s and 80s. I watch the old horror stuff, and you know, because I don't know. I don't. Everything these days seems to be the same old, which is the superheroes, which is why I wanted kind of to do the show to see exactly what is the big deal with these things. Why are these popular? Because it is the same thing over and over, yet these things are making $500 million every time they get released. So I wanted to dive in and see exactly the reason why. So basically, what I'm seeing is, and let's see if you guys agree with this, it comes down to they've taken an age-old story, taking those elements, put a good guy that everybody can identify with, put him as the main character, and thrown it at us, and here you go. And that's basically why these things are popular, to boil it down.
Let me bring up 2 comments that address this. First is we've got one from Lee here. It's saying that the stories never made him believe in them. The obviousness of the story bored him, which that's one side of the argument. Let me bring in Zara as the other. That the shared mythology is a powerful identifier. You think of cultural pride in, because of this idea that these are stories we've grown up with. We have an attachment to them. We have this real connection with them. So it kind of, there's a balance going on there. It's the story we like. Now think about life today and how that translates. Starbucks, you go into it. Is every cup of coffee different? Is it different from town to town? No. We like the fact that we can rely on Starbucks to be the same, to give us the same experience anywhere we go, anywhere in the world. McDonald's, same thing. Hilton Hotels, same thing. We like this feeling of being at home when we're away from home. And while we want to have the wild adventure, it's nice to have that story that grounds it and makes us feel familiar with it as well. So the legend kind of sticks. I think one of the absolute classic examples of this is the story of William Tell, a superhero from the Middle Ages. This guy, he's forced to shoot at an apple on his son's head. If he misses, he's killing his own son. He's forced to do this. Of course, he makes the shot. The thing is, he's this wonderful Swiss legend hero. That story doesn't come from Switzerland. He was never Swiss. This is a story brought back from the Crusades and was originally a Chinese story. This is a martial arts story. And a country identified with that story so much that they adopted it. They adopted this as their hero, even though it was a story brought back from the Crusades. And I think that there is an element to that. We need heroes in our life, and sometimes we want them to be larger than life. We want them to be immense, partly to remind ourselves that, yeah, this isn't real, and I can't expect people to save me, but partly we still learn things from them. Through the extreme, we sometimes see the lesson more, whether it's Bruce Wayne having the ability to have a life of luxury and not have to do all of these things, doesn't use it for his own benefit, and he's still fighting for the people. David threw up earlier that poverty is the cause of crime. Of course it isn't. Otherwise, the Exxon issues would never have happened. Rich people do more crime; they just tend to get away with it. You know, whether it's crimes that are what we call white-collar crimes, or whether it's even murder. If you've got enough money to buy the right lawyer, it's amazing what you can get away with. The poor people just don't necessarily have the choice.
You said something that made me think about boundaries and why children need boundaries. I think it's the same sort of thing that can play into here as well. The superheroes they offer that limitless boundary for the most part. So yeah, like total escapism, and I think it's just very like deep within our core to desire to have those boundaries, but then step outside of them as well.
Yeah, that also ties into something you touched on, Em, and that I wanted to kind of get into also, is the status quo side of this, the comfort, the same old, that is one of my nemesis, that we get comfortable in certain things, and that's what we like, and we don't want to get away from that. Again, we mentioned these stories aren't anything new. They've been around for thousands of years, using the same mythical type characters. Really it's just the people and places that have changed, but everything else is the same, and that is part of our DNA. It's drilled into us. So does it really need to take anything for these movies to get popular, because they have all these things built right in? It's all this status quo. And Kristen, you're talking about boundaries. It's kind of an oxymoron, because on one hand it's the same old, but on the other hand it can inspire us to get out of our boundaries, to get out of our comfort zone, to go and do something worthwhile. I mean, that's what Batman did. It's what a lot of these superheroes did. They took a disadvantage and turned it into advantage. Spider-Man got bit by a spider. Now he's Spider-Man. That disadvantage is now his advantage. So it's kind of an interesting thing when you think about it, that it's both the same old, but yet they can inspire us to get out of our comfort zone and to cross those boundaries and to ignore those and to go out there and kick some ass.
Yeah. Now, we've got a couple of issues there. I mean, the first is, it's the same old story. But according to the Greeks, who were huge on theatre, there are only, I think it was something like 11 plots. And boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy has to win girl back. It's one of those stories, and it's over and over and over. How anyone can watch chick flicks, who knows? And yet they do. There is an element, though, where being constrained by a format and formula actually inspires more creativity within it. Let me give an example. A haiku, those really tightly formatted poems, or even a limerick if you want to go downstream. The more tightly a set of boundaries are put there, the more creative you have to be within them, and the more you can appreciate the creativity within it. It highlights by giving us a real focus to show what the creative thought is, and I sometimes think that superhero movies really do give us that opportunity. This guy has to be super, he has to have powers, but there has to be this conflict, there has to be something that makes us think about the nature of power itself, the nature of responsibility, the nature of choices. And how well a movie does that determines how good the movie is, and how well a character makes us do that determines that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. There is only so many stories, and I do think, though, for me, the stories, the movies, the books, whatever, that intrigue me and make me a fan are the ones that take that story and twist it and bend it and break it so much that it almost becomes a new story. The movie The Signal is kind of like that for me. They've taken this kind of zombie-like, thing, and the way they told that story, I thought was pretty cool. Totally getting off track of superhero movies, but that's the thing. I think for me, that's what I like and what I don't like about superhero movies, and what I guess everybody else does like about superhero movies. So I think, yeah, there is that element of sameness, but at the same time, like you said, Ammon, it does allow for a certain level of creativity. Even if you look at something simple like a tweet, you have to. It's hard. It's for those of us that like to ramble. It's hard to do a tweet because you're limited in that space. What was it? I think it was an author. I can't remember who said it, but something to the effect of, "Sorry for the long letter, but I didn't have time to write a short one."
Mark Twain.
That kind of concept. Mark Twain. Yeah.
Making something really concise is much harder than just letting yourself go. You can ramble as long as you like and get there. To do it in a concise form, that's much, much harder.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. All right. Well, I actually wanted to keep this show at about 30 minutes, and we're about 20 minutes over. So let's wrap it up. Any final thoughts, Ammon?
I think I'd like to bring up one final comment from Paula, and she says that while the special effects add a cool factor, it's not why people see a movie. It's the story, the challenge, the characters. For me, that is so true. One of my favourite of all the Tarantino movies, one of my favourites was Reservoir Dogs. And the reason for that is the scenes are very simple. Almost all of the action happens in that one warehouse after the robbery. And by being just in that one place, we see so much focus on the characters. It brings our focus right in the same way we're talking about with these boundaries. It lets us see such tiny details in the acting, in the characterization of just the characters, instead of getting distracted by the scenery and the special effects and things that are going on. So I think there's a good balance there.
Yep. I would agree. That's why I see movies. I'm very selective in the movies I see, and it is because the characters in the story, and not so much the special effects. Like I said, that'll turn me away, if anything. So, Kristen, any last words, comments, thoughts, questions?
Sure. I think that the most powerful hero stories are our own, and I want to encourage everyone to go out and be your own hero and be someone else's hero.
Love that. That's right. We do.
One final thought that I'll leave people with is the rise of the superhero movie part of the counterbalance to the fall of religion. Were religious stories our bigger than us inspiration for a long, long time, and that as people have become more scientific and less faithful, we need a new faith, and we seek it in science, and the superheroes are the new religious icons. That's my thought to leave people with.
Oh man, that would be a great show. I would love to do that show. That's great. Thanks for that. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you can go see the next superhero movie. I'm sure there's one coming out next week at a theater near you, and it'll make $500 million. So let's go out the economy and make it happen. I guess you guys know what's going on next week. Do we have a show for next week that we can pick?
I think there's a show. I have no idea what it is without looking it up.
Okay. Well, there'll be a show next week along with that superhero movie. So after you watch the superhero movie, come back and watch Code Breakers next week. And until then, see ya.